Hello, I've had some students asking some questions about what the Great Gatsby test will look like and what types of questions will be on it. So I figured I'd just do a run through of the review page in Unit 3, Activity 6, and then show you a sample of what the test will look like. And so to start with, if we look at the test format, the test is going to be broken up into 5 different sections. So the first page will have multiple choice. There will be 8 multiple choice questions. Each will be worth a half mark. And so those multiple choice questions will just be straightforward content style questions where I'll ask about characters or locations or events, and then you'll just circle the one correct answer. You'll have 4 choices and you'll choose the one correct answer. For part B, there's fill in the blank, and this is important here. It says character ID. And what I mean by that is I will give you one sentence describing a character, and then you name that character. If you misspell the character's name, that's okay, but I do need to be able to clearly see which character you're identifying. And so there'll be 6 sentences, each one describing a different character, and then you just, in the fill in the blank, you just write the name of the character that's being described in each sentence. Part C is a short answer, and the short answer questions, there'll be 4 of them. Each one will be worth 3 marks. And so what you'll have to do is you'll have to give me approximately 3 or 4 sentences to answer each question. And I'll show you an example of a question here in a few minutes. But the questions will be very similar to what you would get in the chapter questions. So if you've been doing the chapter questions, you should feel pretty good about the short answer. I'll show you an example in a few minutes. Part D will be comparison questions. There'll be 2 of them. Each one will be worth 4 marks. And so what you'll need to do is be able to compare, say, 2 different characters or 2 different locations in the book or 2 different ideas that are presented in the book. So maybe I ask you to compare Daisy and Jordan, or I ask you to compare Gatsby to Tom Buchanan in some way. So when I say comparison, I mean you'll have to directly compare 2 things in the novel. Again, I'll show you an example here in a minute. Part E is communication, and in that question you'll have to write me a proper paragraph. And what you'll need to do is you'll need to I give you 2 choices, and you choose the question you want to answer, and you have to write 8 to 10 sentences explaining a particular theme in the novel. And so if you go back actually to Unit 3, Activity 5, it covers the different themes in the novels. And so I will take 2 of those themes, turn them into questions, and then you'll have to write a paragraph answering that theme question. Again, I'll give you an example, and you actually have an example in the practice questions down below. So that's what the test will look like. In terms of what to study, in terms of test content, you certainly want to know the characters, the locations, the events, the objects, and the symbols. I'm not going to expect you to know a character that is only mentioned once and is only on 1 page. I'm not going to expect you to remember characters that they don't provide any names for. So when I say characters, you don't have to go through the book and write down every single person that ever went to into one of Gatsby's parties, for instance. But you should know the main characters. You should definitely know the characters that are in the character assignment in Unit 3, Activity 3. Those 8 characters are certainly the most important, but you should know some other characters as well, too. Somebody like Klipspringer, the man that plays the piano and lives in Gatsby's house. He'd be somebody that is in multiple scenes, and we'd need to remember him. Or someone like Owl Eyes, who's in some very important scenes in the book. So make sure you know your characters, your locations, so things like West Egg and East Egg and Valley of the Ashes. You definitely want to know your locations and what happens in those locations. And when I say events, I just mean what happens in the book. I would expect you to know the events throughout the chapters and have an understanding of what the characters go through in the book. Objects, that's kind of an odd term. I just use that as sort of a general term. When I say objects, I would expect you to know, for example, that George Wilson uses a gun to shoot Gatsby. I would expect you to know specific objects that are important throughout the book that really kind of are important to the plot. And symbols, we did a whole activity on symbols, so I would expect you to have an understanding of what the weather represents and how the weather changes in the book. I would expect you to know certainly that green light. I'm not going to go back and go over all of the colors on the test. You've already done an assignment for me on that, so don't worry about memorizing, all these different objects and, that are different colors. But I would expect you to have a general idea of how symbolism works in the novel. In terms of historical context, I'm not going to do much on this, but maybe one or two of the multiple choice questions will have something to do with this. In Unit 3, Activity 1, we cover the Roaring Twenties, which is the time period of the book. And so I would expect you to know that the book takes place in the 1920s, and that certainly the technology and the entertainment and the fashion were different then than they are today. And you can see that in the book. Modernism, we looked at modernism in the Unit 3, Activity 2. So I would expect you to know that this book is considered a modern book. Books that came out after The Great Gatsby kind of copied The Great Gatsby and kind of used its style. And so I would expect you to have a general understanding of what modernism is. Again, I wouldn't ask you to write a big paragraph or anything on modernism, but there could be a multiple choice question. So go back and look at Unit 3, Activity 2 and the little notes on modernism. Your best study guide is the chapter questions. If you've done all the chapter questions and you feel comfortable that you understand them, then you should feel comfortable that you know the characters and the locations and the events and the objects, because anything that was important in the novel is mentioned in those chapter questions. The questions on the test are not going to be the exact same as the chapter questions, but some of them could be very close. And if you know the chapter questions, like I said, you should feel like you know the content of the book. And lastly, we've got Great Gatsby themes. So go back and look at Unit 3, Activity 5, and I've got the themes listed here. I'm going to take these 6 themes and turn 2 of them into a paragraph question, and then you'll have to write about how those themes work in the novel. If you want an example of that type of question, you can click down here on Paragraph Question, and if I open that up, you'll see a sample paragraph question where I ask you about old money and new money, which is a major theme in the novel, and then I ask you to give me specific scenes and specific examples of how old money and new money are in conflict with each other, how they don't get along. So that would be an example of a theme paragraph question. Okay. What else do I've got here? Let me open that up again. You can definitely look at the content questions as well too. These content questions are just practice questions. You might get questions on the test that look something like them, but they're just meant to kind of test your memory. And if you can go through these 20 questions and answer them off the top of your head, you should feel really good that you understood the novel. If you can't answer them off the top of your head, that's okay. You can go back and look back in your chapter questions or go back and look in the novel and find the answers. But this is just kind of a little bit of a pre-test quiz. If you can go through these 20 questions and feel like you know the answers to them, it's a pretty good indication that you paid attention, that you understood the book. Again, some of these questions might pop up in one way or another on the test, but I'm not necessarily giving you the exact questions on the test, but these are a good sort of guide as to what you need to know. All right, so that gives you a run through of the review page. What I've got here in front of me now is a sample of an old test that I did in grade 11 English, and it's on a different book. So none of these questions are going to be on your test, but your test is going to look pretty much just like this. So I figured I would show you an example of what the test is going to look like. So if you look, you've got multiple choice. There'll be 8 multiple choice questions. Each is worth a half mark. And so the questions will have to do with the setting, the locations, the characters, the events. Like I said here, the events in To Kill a Mockingbird take place during which decade, right? Well, I just mentioned how in our book, the story takes place in the 1920s, right? So these are types of questions that you would get in the multiple choice. The fill in the blank is going to look like this. I'm going to give you 1-sentence descriptions for 6 characters, and then you're just going to have to write in the blank the name of the character. So you'll have to know your characters. Also, in the short answer, you're going to have 4 questions. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll give you plenty of space to answer them. You'll need to answer in about 3 sentences. You'll notice the number 3 is really important here. I ask for 3 types of conflict in the book here. I ask for 3 pieces of evidence. It's 3 marks. You'll always see I ask for 3 examples or 3 pieces of detail from the novel. So be ready to give me 3 examples in your short answers. Then we've got comparison questions. So in this case, in the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, I'm asking the students to compare 2 different characters and their different parenting styles. So I could ask you to compare 2 characters in our novel, The Great Gatsby, and to tell me the similarities and differences in their personality, for example. I could ask you about 2 different locations in the book and ask you to compare them. Or I could ask you about 2 different ideas that pop up in the book and ask you to compare them. But just be prepared to compare and to show me similarities and differences. I would say these questions probably will require about 4 or 5 sentences. And then lastly, there'll be a paragraph answer, and I'll give you actually a choice. There's only 1 question here, but I'll give you 2 questions, and you choose which question you want to answer. And so in this case, it says bravery is a major theme in To Kill a Mockingbird. Fully explain how 3 characters show courage and act bravely. Includes a specific example from the novel to support each character. So again, you're going to have to probably give me 3 examples in your supporting details in the paragraph answer. And you'll have to write a proper paragraph. So give me a topic sentence where you introduce the topic. Then give me, say, 6 or 7 body sentences where you're giving me your examples and you're proving your points. And then give me a concluding sentence that wraps up. And that's the test. That's the different parts of the test, and that's how it'll look. I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions about the test, please let me know. If you haven't already scheduled the time to come in and write the test, please do. It's important that you respond to my email and let me know. One other thing to point out, on the review page, there is a final assignment. If you go to the assignment, there is a portfolio entry that ends our Great Gatsby unit as well too. So make sure that you're keeping up with your portfolio entries. They are worth half of your final exam mark, and you'll hand in all of your portfolio entries at the ending of the semester. So if you're having any portfolio questions, let me know as well too. Okay. Other than that, I'll see you in class on your scheduled date for your Great Gatsby test. Thanks.